Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world. In 30 answers, discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm very, very excited to be sitting with Bob Cabral of Bob Cabral Wines. Bob, welcome to Wine Soundtrack, and I'm going to say, tell us a little bit about yourself, but I think a lot of people know your name, but tell us a little bit about yourself and Bob Cabral Wines.
Okay, well, thank you for having me, Allison. I appreciate it. Bob Cabral Wines was started in 2015 by my wife and I, and the idea was to find a way to continue to be philanthropic. In 2024, this year, I'll do my 45th harvest in California at a commercial winery. And I've learned over the years working for several other wineries, like Williams-Sonoma, Hartford Court, Three Sticks, to name a few. The philanthropic part of the wine business is really what makes me feel good about the wine business. Mm-hmm. I love making wine. I love the fact that I get to grow grapes and I get to continue to kind of be a shepherd of the earth, of agriculture. But I think taking care of our communities is really important. And I still sit on a couple of school boards and Boys and Girls Club, and again, not trying to tout my own horn, but I believe in making sure that we're taking care of kids and our community.
And you do that through your wine.
Absolutely. So we agreed that, my wife and I agreed that after operating expenses that we would use the money for places like the Boys and Girls Club or local schools. Unfortunately, in Sonoma County in the past 5, 6, 7 years, we've had, like around the world, COVID. So we've had to help people maneuver through that with the loss of businesses, with the loss of their homes. We've also had some kind of devastating fires here in California and in Northern California especially. And so we've had several friends that have lost their businesses and their homes to the fires. So how can we help them out to get them back on their feet? Because in the end, that's what it's all about.
What is your total case production?
So for Bob Cabral Wines, it's about 1,500 cases right now, and then another 1,000 to 1,200 cases of private labels I do for restaurants, a couple of restaurateurs.
And you don't own any vineyards at this time?
I don't.
So where are you sourcing fruit from?
Most of my fruit now comes from primarily Sonoma County, Sonoma Coast, West Sonoma Coast, Russian River Valley. I've looked into purchasing a vineyard, which is still in the works. I'm in my 60s, so planting a vineyard is a little bit daunting at this point. But I've also realized that as I continue to build this brand, I need to have a little bit more control over at least some of my fruit. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm actually working with more growers than I am vineyard management companies. So I'm buying grapes from Paul Hobbs' estate. In fact, I made wines with Paul down at the Cundy Winery. I made some of his first vintages in the early 90s, and Paul's got some spectacular vineyards out on the Sonoma coast as well as near his winery on Highway 116 in Sebastopol. So Paul grows enough grapes to be able to sell a little excess, mm-hmm. and I only need 2 to 5 ton lots, and he lets me kind of cherry pick the clones and the rootstocks, the blocks that I think would make a good component to my blends, because I'm not doing any single vineyards. Right. He has offered to let me put Gold Rock Estate or Shell Estate or Paul Hobbs Estate. Paul doesn't need any more advertising, so I told him he'd have to actually drop the price if he wants me to put the name on. And so we actually had a pretty good laugh about that one. But Paul's a really great winemaker that I look up to, and his vineyard manager that oversees everything is a kid named Bryson Hill, and he is a farmer through and through. Mm-hmm. I go out to check my blocks, figuring that we're at a stage that something needs to be done, whether it's leaf pulling or canopy management, and it's already done. So he's
I
on
can
it.
read your mind.
No, he's reading Paul's mind.
Ah.
And again, working with Paul over the years past, you know what you need to make these kind of wines.
And so I know that you are a maestro of Pinot Noir and you do Chardonnay. Do you make any other varieties?
I did graft and then planted two Riesling vineyards on the Sonoma coast. One actually in the West Sonoma coast out in Occidental. I don't get that vineyard anymore now just because the grower wouldn't do what I really needed him to do. But I'm fascinated with Riesling. I've known Ernie Lowson from Dr. Ernst Lowson in Germany for 35 years. We've been trading wines. He has taught me so much about that grape varietal. And his mission on this earth is to get everybody to at least try Riesling once in their lifetime.
I think they should.
Agreed. And I probably drink more dry Rieslings than I do Chardonnays at this point.
You jumped ahead to my next question, which is, well, first, before I ask you what you drink, what is your first memory relevant to wine? I mean, I know you've done 45 vintages, so I don't know if you can think back even further, but...
I can, actually. I grew up in the Central Valley near Stockton, Modesto area. My dad farmed with his father, who is a Portuguese immigrant. Mm-hmm. His parents were immigrants from Portugal, and we grew grapes, mainly red wine grapes and almonds and alfalfa, some other row crops. By the time I'd left for college in the late 70s, my dad had a vineyard management company, was farming a little over 1,000 acres of grapes and about 400 acres of almonds. And we made wine in my grandfather's barn every year. A barrel of usually Grenache Rosé and then a dry Zinfandel or a Barbera mix. So he always had 2 barrels of wine, and then it was shared amongst the cousins and the siblings. My grandfather was one of 11 children, and my grandmother was one of 9 children. So we had a big family.
And of course, culturally, wine is part of that.
Yeah, I mean, we had wine on the table all the time. And my mom had a story at one point where she said that I was literally kindergarten, first grade, and my dad had a little half barrel up on his workbench of some Grenache Rosé. And it actually had a spigot in it, so you didn't have to siphon it. Everything else, all the other barrels, we use siphons to fill like gallon jugs and then put twist tops on them. And that's what they would serve them at the dinner table or take over to one of our other relatives. And I guess the height of this barrel was just good enough so my friend and I could go underneath the barrel while one guy turned the spigot open, and of course it was left sweet. So it was this fruity Grenache Rosé that was sweet. And
you got a little drunk in kindergarten?
My friend went home, and I guess he pretty much passed out in his room, and my mother got a call from his mother, what was going on. And my mom realized that, we hadn't closed it, so there was a lot of wine underneath by my dad's workbench. And so that was kind of, I guess, I don't really
hide the barrel from the kids.
Hide the barrel, the Grenache Rosé, right? No more Grenache Rosé.
Oh, you started off with something good. So I'm curious, today, do you have a favorite grape variety? Is Pinot Noir the ultimate grape, or is Riesling your ultimate grape, or...
I enjoy making wine from all of them. I think they're all just very unique and different. I think Pinot Noir is one of the most versatile reds, especially if you're going out to dinner with a group of people, and especially if I can go out with a group of people that don't know what I do for a living. Mm-hmm. And, there's a suggestion, what do we have with if there's 3 or 4 couples, what do we have with dinner? And somebody says a white wine, and sometimes I'll just say dry Riesling if I can find one on the list, or a Sauvignon Blanc. Chardonnay, if I know the producer and it's not a lot of oak, or, I understand what they're doing. Mm-hmm. With Pinot Noir, it's this lighter, fruitier, nice acidity, kind of a balanced wine that will go well with fish. It'll go well with beef, pork, chicken, and everybody's kind of happy.
Right. Does that make Pinot Noir sort of a perfect grape? Is there such thing?
I don't know that it's a perfect grape. I think it's a great varietal to have to have access to at a restaurant. Yeah.
At your home, if we came into your home, what would we find in your home? Is it wines you've made over the years, friends' wines from around the world, certain grapes?
So, I finally built, we live out in Dry Creek, and I bought 5 acres about 12 or 13 years ago so my daughter could raise some animals in 4-H. And we've done remodels for almost 9 years, and I finally took a room and turned it into a little over a 4,000 bottle cellar. And the one thing I learned early on as a young winemaker is, and I was never worried about getting paid a lot of money, but I always liked drinking my own wines. So in almost all of my employment contracts, as part of my compensation, I always asked for a case of everything I make.
Oh, wow.
And I still do that as a consultant. So, by the time I had left Williams-Sonoma at the end of 2014, we must have had 36, 38 different wines, labeled wines.
Right. Wow.
So I've got cases and cases. I've got the wall of Williams-Sonoma. And same thing at Three Sticks. So, as we grew that brand, a couple of other wineries. So I do have some of the older wines that I've made. And it's
pretty special treat.
It is. At Williams-Sonoma, I actually started taking a lot of them in magnums and even 3s, 5s, and 9s. And I donate a lot of those to charity auctions at this point. I'll sign an old Williams-Sonoma mag, and at the Alexander Valley Grammar School spaghetti feed, that magnum will go for $800-900, and that'll buy like all the art supplies for the 3rd grade teacher for a year.
You find another way to give back.
Exactly. It's awesome.
Is there anything from your cellar you opened recently that drank really well?
Well, and then I'm also on a couple of wine lists. I'm on Steve Kistler sold Kistler back in 2008, I believe, and had started Occidental with his daughters. And he makes primarily Pinot Noir. I'm not even sure that he's making Chardonnay out there, but I had known Steve and gotten to know Steve even better over the years, and I'm on the Occidental list. I find his wines fascinating, and I enjoy drinking them. And actually, we just opened an SWK, which is Stephen W. Kistler Vineyard. So there's one block that they call SWK, and my wife loves them, but I kind of hide them. Michael Brown is like a little brother to me, and I buy the Cirque and the Chev wines just because I find them interesting. And, we remember the good old days when we lived in tract homes and drove minivans, and our wives are good friends. And it's just, it's special. And then I go to France once a year to make the barrels, and I became good friends. I first met him in 1988. He was the winemaker at Comte de Vogüé, Francois Milat. And so over the years, I've bought a lot of those wines, the Musigny, Chameau Musigny. I've got a little bit of Clos de Tar. I do like to spend a little bit of money on some of the nice Burgundy.
Yeah.
I really like the wines up in Chablis, as far as Chardonnays go, and then actually also down in Pouilly-Fuissé, where they're a little bit lighter. They remind me of certain areas of the Sonoma coast, kind of down towards Carneros. I find them very similar in textures and wine. So, and then being Portuguese, I have a huge port collection. But I also inherited some of those when my dad passed in 2000, in 2000. Yeah.
Wow. That sounds like a wine cellar I'd like to get locked into.
I'm still also drinking old, I have to say, during Christmas, I drank a 2007 Lozen Dry Riesling, and it was spectacular. Yeah.
Wow. So you've worked for a lot of illustrious brands that have been critic darlings, and I'm curious now, as a smaller producer making 1,500 cases, what's your opinion on wine critics and scores?
I think that what I recommend to the consumers is to find a wine critic that they actually connect with. So everybody has a different palate, and they're going to have different impressions. I had this conversation last night with somebody where someone had gotten literally 100 points from one critic and a 91 from another critic.
Yeah, and what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. What does that mean? And both two very credible, they're one of the big 3 or 4 kind of nationally known magazines. For me, I get up just trying to do my best every day, and I let the cards fall where they may. The wine scores, I think, definitely help guide the consumer towards sometimes a brand. I would rather consistently get 94, 95, 96 from 6 different people or 10 different people than that one perfect score.
Right. And also, as we were talking before, what does that mean when you get 100? There's only one way to go.
Right. You're at the top.
Yeah.
And is it achievable? And you're going to be disappointed. And along those lines, so I actually did make a 100-point wine from one of the first 100-point wines from North America, Pinot Noir from the Williams-Sonoma vineyard, the state vineyard. And the next year I got a 98 from the exact same critic, and I had a consumer ask me what happened. And I just started laughing, and I was stunned, and I was like, I would have been happy with a 93, I mean, and what happened? I said, well, a different vintage, different growing season, different, the barrels were different that they went in. Not every barrel from Francois Ferrer tastes exactly like the previous one.
Yeah.
So, what do you say to that other than... Sorry.
It was 2 points. So as a wine drinker, one answer question: red, white, or rosé?
My preference? Reds. Yeah, I tend to lean more towards the reds. To me, there's just a lot of different complexities to them, and I've made a lot of red wine, and there's a lot.
Still or sparkling?
Water? Still. I could never really drink a lot of soda as a kid or anything, so I was never like a Coca-Cola drinker or anything like that, because carbonation, I don't do carbonation well, but I love champagnes and sparkling wine. In fact, my wife and I, our treat when we first got married was like a half bottle of Krug. And that would be like the whole evening for Valentine's Day. There were no chocolates, there was no food. It was like we could afford the half bottle of Krug. But I really do enjoy those. And, nowadays, though, I also really enjoy the white wines. A lot of times, Heather and I go out to dinner, and she'll have a glass of red, or she'll say, hey, what do you think of this? Or do you know this guy? And it's like, yeah, I've made wine with him before, and you're going to like that. And I'll have a glass of white. Sometimes I want something just a little more refreshing. And I think restaurants, and this is my opinion, only in my humble opinion, serve red wines too warm. Yeah. They all do. They all think that 75, 80 degrees, and I don't care if it's a 12% alcohol wine, because I keep our cellar at home at 54 degrees Fahrenheit.
And the reds drink beautifully.
And the reds, yeah. And so do even big barrel fermented Chardonnays. Not with a lot of oak, but just that big barrel ferment. I don't want them ice cold either, because then it mutes too much of it. Most refrigerators are in that 40 to 42 degrees Fahrenheit. So, I wish that restaurants would serve reds cooler.
Well, speaking of restaurants, I know you were saying earlier that when you're with a group of friends, the easiest wine that you pick to pair with a meal is Pinot Noir, because it's so food friendly. Do you have any other kind of rules? Do you think there are rules people should follow when it comes to pairing food and wine? Or is it really more just Pinot Noir will be pretty equal opportunist?
I think that it's whatever people want to. People want to drink. You have to kind of gauge the crowd. And if you're with a group of 8 and 5 of them, go, oh yeah, I love the Silver Oak Cabernet, or I like the Jordan Cabernet, or I like Opus One. Okay, then they're going to probably buy food that can handle those kind of tannins and that kind of structured wine. So then you look for maybe something different. It could be a Rhone blend. It could be almost anything. Or a nice Cabernet Franc or Merlot.
Yeah.
So
if space aliens were to land on your property, walk up to your door and knock on it, and you were to welcome them with one of your wines, which of your wines would you want to welcome them with?
Probably, like, even over the years, or just like today. Today, I would give them my current, my 2015 Troubadour Russian River Valley Pinot. It's just drinking really well right now, and that vision I had for the first vintage is starting to come to fruition in the glass. As I've tasted it over the years, and especially the first couple of years, I questioned whether I was gonna, that I'd made the right decisions along the way. But now I would hand them a glass of my Troubadour Pinot. Yeah. Yeah.
So you said you've done 45 vintages now, 43 coming up on 45 vintages, and the wines you're making today, you're not doing vineyard designates, as you said, you're doing sort of geographical. In all the time that you've spent in vineyards over the years and working with different regions across Sonoma, we know that every vintage tells a different story, but how much variation do you see from year to year, or is it different within different regions?
Again, it just depends on the weather pattern and the cycle. Like we came out of kind of a severe drought, if you will, 2019, 2020, even into 2021, to where we're definitely in an El Nino cycle, where the winters of 22 into 23 and now 23 into 24, we're seeing above average rainfalls. These vines, the earth likes water. That's what sustains us all. So you see big growth on redwood trees, on oak trees, and grapevines. So they're like replenished. They're happier. So I am anticipating better vintages as long as the heat, or we don't have any fire events or smoke events. I would anticipate some pretty good vintages. The 2023 vintage was relatively cool, and I picked a lot of grapes in October, which is when I used to pick these vineyards, when I started in Sonoma County. So in the 80s, the 90s, and even into the early 2000s at Williams-Sonoma, we would pick Coastlands October 15th. We would pick Hirsch October 12th, October 8th. And everybody that's kind of new to it was like, oh, it's such a late year. And I'm going, well, 20 years ago, this is when it was normal. We'd start in the Russian River Valley. The sparkling guys would pick in August, early August. We wouldn't start till after Labor Day in the Russian River Valley. And then we would finish up with Sonoma Coast wines in October. I even picked Coastlands in 1999. November 3rd, and it was barely 23 bricks. My alcohol was 13.8 or something like that, 13.7. Yeah.
And so so you see evolution over time, the creeping.
Yeah, and now it's kind of starting to come back a little bit. So we used to see bloom, or we used to see bud break in February, and it kind of pushed into March and then late March. Now we're starting to see bud break a little bit earlier, February into March. So we're getting these long hang times, especially in the Russian River Valley. You know, I have vineyards that go into Troubadour. There's 6 vineyards. And it's kind of southwest of Sebastopol, what they call the Sebastopol Hills. And 3 of those vineyards I pick after I pick my West Sonoma Coast vineyards. And West Sonoma Coast is cold.
Yeah.
These are even colder. They're at a lower elevation, but they're right in that fog that comes up off of the Marin headlands. And it's just cold there. And sometimes the fog in 2023 never broke all day long. Whereas out on the coast, on the West Sonoma coast, it actually broke. And so I picked one vineyard 2 weeks after Gold Rock, after the Sonoma coast.
So in all the years you've been doing this, have you established any sort of good luck rituals that you do at the beginning of harvest?
I like to sit the crew down if I can and taste them through all the Bob Cabral wines. Or if I'm at Three Sticks. We didn't do this at Brickler. I wish we'd have done that this year. But sit them down and taste them through the wines and walk them through kind of what we're trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And I think it gives the crew a better idea of what they're in for. You know, why we want them punched down every 6 hours and not every 12 hours. And we're trying to get this type of extraction. And we want things kept clean. You know, we want the barrels clean I don't want to go into dirty barrels. So I've always kind of done that. I've done it where we popped a bottle of champagne on the first day, but then we got to go back and work at a winery, you know.
Yeah, that's not as fun.
Yeah, and you got to clean and equipment. Wineries are dangerous, and I'm not a big believer of drinking on the job kind of thing. And I think you have to. You're not at your best when you're a little tipsy. And people get hurt, and I don't want to see that happen. So, you know, yeah. I share wines with people, but they're
not
lucky.
During work.
Well, we've done them at lunch, even at Three Sticks, but you get literally like an ounce taste of one wine. And, you know, they're eating, and we sit down we take 30 to 60 minutes to just converse, take a rest, walk away from the harvest for just a few minutes during the day.
I love it. So now you said you grew up in the Stockton area. Your dad grew grapes. Mm-hmm. You've been making wine for 45 years, but I'm curious, did you always know you wanted to be a winemaker, or what did you want to be when you were a little boy? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Bull rider.
A bull rider.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with rodeos and horses and yeah. Actually rode bulls in high school with friends and got tossed a couple of times and yeah, when you get hurt, it's like this isn't a career. After that, I decided to apply to veterinary school, and a buddy and I was heavily into the sciences. We got into UC Davis, and I was 18 years old, graduating the 12th grade. And they handed me a course catalog that said I was going to have to go to school for 8 more years. And I freaked out and said, I don't want to do that. So I ended up then at Fresno. I'd been accepted at Cal Poly, Fresno State, and UC Davis. And so I ended up down at Fresno State to study winemaking and viticulture, and ended up really getting into the biochemistry. Went back to grad school for biochem down at Fresno State and just started working at wineries. And it just, yeah, felt good to be doing something like that.
So when you look back at your career, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date? I mean, I'm sure that it's hard to pick a lot of things. There's been a lot of successes, but what would you say stands out as one of your proudest achievements?
The best, I think the crowning achievement or achievements would be the assistant winemakers and the cellar masters that have worked for me. that are now winemakers, or they own their own brands. And to see these kids come up, in their early 20s, early 30s, and now, like on a panel that I just sat on for Passion for Pinot down in the Palm Desert, Ross Cobb has his own wines now, and there's really some brilliance to his winemaking. I appreciate his thought process, and to see him mature from, this kid racking barrels and cleaning equipment to, making world-class wines. Same thing with Ryan Pritchard at Three Sticks, Jeff Mangahas over at William Selliam. William Selliam, I used to go through assistant winemakers. If I could keep a guy maybe 3 or 4 vintages, I was lucky, because they always wanted my job. They wanted to be winemaker, which is a good position to be in, because they were always pushing me. So not only did I get to show them, these are the mistakes I made,
right,
avoid those, they also taught me new things. They were coming fresh out of school, fresh out of micro classes, chemistry classes, so they kept me learning. And I think it's important to keep learning about your craft. And that's why it's so late in my life, I actually, like I said, making barrels. I used to order barrels like I would order off of a menu at In-N-Out Burger. Give me a double with cheese and fries. Well, give me a Francois Ferrer medium plus toasted heads.
Yeah.
Great. 100 of them would show up. Now it's a little bit more thoughtful process and why is it giving my wines these flavors? So, mentoring people for me has been probably the best part. The wines, if you go out and just try every day, give it your best, one of the results will be great wines. And that's what I try to tell the harvest crews. I try to tell it's not about perfection, because we're making wine in one big gray area, and it's different shades of gray. Mother Nature throws more curves balls at you than you could ever imagine. So just try your best.
Yeah.
And some days you'll make a 85-point wine, and other days it'll be a 95-point wine. But you know what? Both of them are okay because you tried.
Right.
You can't control it all.
And one person's 85 is someone else's 95.
Exactly. One man's ceiling is another man's floor.
So I'm curious, that's a lot of really good advice, and you have mentored so many people. Is there someone, a mentor of yours, or maybe it was your father or mother or another family member? Is there a piece of advice someone gave you at some point in your life that you try to really live by, or has really been a foundation for how you look at life or work?
Yeah, work, growing up on a farm, my dad, we had animals and everything, and it didn't matter if you were sick. Those animals had to be taken care of twice a day, fed and watered, just like any animal. They rely on you. So we always had this saying that the animals have got to be fed. And I use that to this day. I have a couple of good friends that I see sometimes young people not being quite as motivated, that sometimes you have to work when your hands hurt or you've got a headache or a bit of a cough. Sometimes you just got to take some Dayquils and you got to go in and get it done. Those grapes aren't going to wait for you. So
you were taught a good work ethic.
A good work ethic.
Yeah.
The other thing is just follow your passions too. Don't be afraid to do something out of the norm. And with Bob Cabral Wines, it's not formulaic. Whereas, and I don't like to use the word cookbook, but at William Selliam, I've always been paid to make a style for that brand. So Three Sticks needs to taste like Three Sticks. We did kind of Ryan and I developed that together. But it was a lot of input from Ryan. Ryan, what barrels do you like? Because the goal here is you to be the winemaker. I was hired on as the winemaker. He was the assistant. And after about 2 years, I was like, okay, he needs to be the winemaker. So let's put his hand on it. At Williams-Salem, it needed to taste like Williams-Salem. Now, I make wine different than Bert did and different than Jeff Mangahaus, the current winemaker, which is okay. But when the consumer buys that bottle, it always tastes like Williams-Salem. And that's the important thing. So with Bob Cabral Wines, I have a little bit more creative ability that I make a lot of decisions on the fly.
Well, you get to make your wines.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't like as much whole cluster that I did last year, and so I'll decrease it down to 25%. Or, like Ross was saying today, let's put 75% in there. Try something a little different. A little bit far out of my comfort zone, but you know what? I've had great successes when I do those things. You know, I was always taught that the sweeter fruit was at the end of the branch, and you have to reach out just a little bit further. You don't want to fall off the ladder, but reach for it.
I love that.
Yeah.
So when you're not making wine and working in wine, what are your other passions? What do you like to do for fun?
I like to go to live music, concerts. I can go and appreciate what those artists are doing, and I don't think about winemaking. I don't think about grape growing. I just kind of lose myself in the instruments. I like to focus on the bass player or the drummer at times for certain songs, and it's where I find that regenerative kind of peacefulness that I think we all need. Some people crochet, some people woodwork. I have a cousin that has a very high power. He's very high up in an organization down in the Silicon Valley, and I'm sure it's pressure. He woodworks. You know, I deconstructed a barrel. I took it apart for him, and he made me 2 little end tables, and they're beautiful. I've had people go, I'd pay it like $500 for these, and I go, I don't think I don't think he needs that much therapy.
He's not quitting his day job yet.
He's not quitting it. So I like to do that. You know, just kind of even hanging out in my own house. I like where I live. I like. Our daughter's in college now, and it's my wife and I, and just reconnecting, finding those moments because we're busy all the time, and having your own brand. My poor wife answers her phone on the weekends. Hello, Bob Cabral Wines. You know, and then sometimes we're jumping in the car and we're taking 6 bottles down to a restaurant in Healdsburg because they're out of the Chardonnay or they're out of the Pinot.
Yeah, it's never ending.
It's never ending, and that's okay if you can find those other moments when it's like, okay. The other day, she's like, my eyeglasses are ready to be picked up, and it was pouring rain, and she goes, you know, I don't want to drive. Let's jump in the car. I'll drive you. Yeah. You know, let's just go. She's like, really? You want to drive in this? It's like
what a good husband.
It's like a monsoon out there. And I was like, hey, I've worn eyeglasses since the 3rd grade. Yeah. So she had a new prescription, and you just see better. You feel better. Yeah. You know.
So when you're not driving your wife around and doing nice things, nice husband things,
I'm more like I'm driving her crazy. So I have to do those.
But if you were going to plan a romantic evening, what sort of wines do you open to set a romantic mood? What's romantic for you guys, wine-wise?
Wine-wise, it can vary. You know, sometimes it's like, let's start with some bubbles, or, you know, we were talking about it today at lunch, Sauvignon Blanc, you know, Rocchioli Sauvignon Blanc. I said, you still got, she had gotten a couple of cases. She talked Tom's daughter, Rachel, who runs the winery now, into like 2 cases. I mean, you got to be on a list to get this stuff. And she runs into her at the grocery store, and Rachel's like, and Heather's like, can I get, you know, 6 bottles? And Rachel's like,
sure,
whatever you want. And she goes, really, whatever I want? So she buys 2 cases of it. So, you know, it just kind of depends the mood we're in. Yeah. But we do drink a lot of Pinots, and she's good friends, like I said, with Sarah Brown. So it's like, let's drink a Cirque tonight. Yeah. You know, it's a little bit of a special occasion, and they're just really pretty wines. Or, like I said, an Occidental Kanzler. I buy a little bit of grapes from the Kanzler estate, And we love Alex and Bree, and Heather's on the mailing list. So it's like, let's have a bottle of Kanzler tonight. So
I love it. Well, with the 4,000 bottles you have at home, I'm sure you have a lot of good things to pull out. Question for you. Complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
A day without sunshine.
Very good.
Well, my mom had a plate like from the 70s hanging in her kitchen that literally said, a day without wine is like a day without sunshine. And I remember that in grammar school. You know, because it was right there by the kitchen table, so that one was easy.
That was too easy. So I have another scenario for you. We're sitting at a table, your wines are on the table, and you have an empty seat at the table. Who from any walk of life would you like to be sharing a bottle of Bob Cabral wines with? Living or deceased?
Right.
Personal or famous or infamous?
Yeah. My dad, yeah. My dad, who passed away before I started the brand. So when I'll never forget, because I've been on the William Selliam list since college. And how I told my dad, we were sitting on their back patio. This is in 1998. And we were drinking a bottle of William Selliam. And I was kind of dying to tell him that I had just gotten the winemaker job there. Yeah. And we got through about 3/4 of the bottle, and he had an empty glass, so I pushed it over so he could fill it up. And he poured some in, and I said, so that's my new employer. First words out of his mouth, can you get me on the list? Not congratulations, I'm so proud of you. Not that I was looking for that kind of praise, but I started laughing so hard. I'm like, Dad, I could get you on the list.
You go right to the top.
I wanted him to, because he was drinking all of mine. I was happy to get him on the list so that I could save a little bit of money at that point.
Well, he'd be number one on the Bob Cabral Wines list, so.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, I've got one more question, and then we play a little game and we're done. And that is, no. You know what? I'm going to take that back. We're going to play a game first, and then I'll ask my last question.
Okay.
You mentioned that you are a huge music fan, and we always love to play a game at the end of the podcast because we tie in wine and music, because wine conjures up emotions in us, music does. And I want you to equate your wines to music.
Okay.
So, I was drinking earlier today your Chardonnay, and I'd like you to tell me what that makes you think of.
That Chardonnay, it makes me think of...
and it was the
Anne Rose. Anne Rose Chardonnay. So Anne, my wife's middle name, and Rose, my daughter's middle name. It reminds me of actually the music that they like. And so Adele, it reminds me, Heather and I went to opening night in Las Vegas to see Adele. It was one of the most phenomenal shows I've ever been to, and I thought I'd seen everything in Vegas. My daughter is big into kind of bluegrass, and there's, bands like Camp and Mount Joy, Bruno Mars, the joy that music brings to them is what that Chardonnay brings to me.
I love it. The Pinot Noir you would give the Space Aliens?
Jeff Beck. I actually met Jeff. He signed a guitar for me, and I gave him some wine because his manager had said that he was a Pinot fan. And it was one of my guitar heroes, one of my top three, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, and David Gilmour. Jeff was then doing a show about 3 years later in Belgium. We get a call from a promoter in Belgium looking for some 2009 William Selliam. And he couldn't find it online, and so he went to the source. And the girls in the office said, hey, I got this guy on the phone. Jeff had put in the rider 6 bottles of William Selliam.
Nice.
Backstage. That's what he wanted.
Well, how many different Pinots do you make today?
I have a second one that's coming out. I just bottled it on Tuesday, and it's a new West Sonoma Coast, and it's not Fillmore. What I realized with Fillmore is that I didn't want to infringe on any trademarks. So I dropped that label. Plus, they pulled 2 of the 3 vineyards. So I knew I was going to make a new blend. But the new one is actually called Electric Hippie. Ooh. And that name conjures up a little bit more of that, it's that acidity or that electricity. But you know what? It's kind of a mellow wine, too. It's got some really nice mellow flavors. What does that bring to mind? Warren Haynes, Government Mule, Joe Bonamassa. I saw both of them at Red Rocks this last summer. I'd never been to Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado. Great venue. And was able to watch back-to-back shows. And that kind of inspired that wine a little bit. That I had the right name.
And you also make a Riesling, right?
I do, from the Sonoma Coast through 2019, and then I started sourcing from outside of McMinnville, an old vineyard planted in 1973 called the Highland Vineyard. And it's done in a concrete amphora. I do one 320-gallon amphora. It's dry, and I call that Wildflowers.
And music?
Music for that, to me, is more like acoustic, David Gilmour, Pink Floyd. It's just a lot more mellow, kind of.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, you have been amazing. It's been such a pleasure listening to you, talking with you. And I have one final question that's a 2-part question. And the first is, what wine region in the world is at the top of your bucket list to explore, to visit?
Well, to make wine in, if I could do it before I'd love to make wine in Burgundy, in the Côte de Nuit. And there's a lot of different vineyards. I'd work with them. I'd probably work with Village Fruit if they just let me make wine up there. A place that I haven't explored, I've been to the country, but I haven't explored the wine region really a lot, is Germany. And Ernie's invited me over. He's like, I've got houses for you to stay in. And
as a Riesling fan, you should go.
Yes, I need to make that trek soon. So.
And the flip side to that is, if people want to taste your wines, can they find you? How can they find you? Where are your wines available? Can they taste with you? What are the options?
Sure. We do tastings by appointment. Sometimes that location is mobile. It just depends. We had a tasting room before COVID, and then that all kind of closed down. We were kind of a tasting room inside a tasting room. But if you just go to www.Bob Cabral Wines, CABRAL, plural, WINES.com. You can buy our wines, or you can call my wife Heather, and that's on the website as
Fantastic. Well. And your wines are direct to consumer, or are they in any markets?
We're in a few restaurants in California right now, but trying to expand out into some more restaurants. I've got some Psalms in Las Vegas that want the wines, and Austin, Texas, Chicago. So I just don't make a lot. The plan over the next 4 or 5 years, I'll be honest with you, we're at 1,500 cases, is to get up to that 5,000-6,000 case mark.
Well, in the meantime, if you want to check out Bob Cabral Wines and you want to have the honor of sitting with him and tasting the wines, reach out, check him out. Beautiful Pinot, Chard. Haven't tasted the Riesling yet, but I look forward to that. I need to try that. But Bob, thank you so much for joining us on Wine Soundtrack, and I hope you had a good time.
I did. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.